This video is designed to be an instructional training video for the new Aquaform builder, as well as a training video for new crew members that have been hired at later dates. In this video, we're going to learn preparation and unloading of the forms, form accessories, and form identification, tools to use on the job, applying form release agent to the forms, which forms to set first, concrete design mixture and specification, setting lights, return inlets, skimmers, and rope anchors inside the forms, pouring of the forms, stripping of the forms, cleaning and storage of the forms. First thing I want to talk to you about is timing. How long it should take to set these forms to have them ready to pour a concrete wall. This size pool right here with this step, you should be able to set this pool up in 5 to 5.5 hours and have it ready to pour. Now we're not going to do that today. You're not going to do it the next time, the third time, and probably the fourth time. You won't quite hit that mark, but you ought to be getting better and better every time you do it. The thing about it is you've got to develop a system of bringing the forms to the job, laying them out around the pool, and setting them up. And once everybody becomes familiar with it and you start repeating that and improving on it, your speed is going to pick up. Today, we've got to set up the skimmer panel, the return inlet panels, the light panels. I want to spend a little time with you to start off just to kind of familiarize yourself with what we're going to be doing today and the different items that you're going to be handling. Aluminum forms, they're not cheap. These forms should be able to pour over 3,000 swimming pools. Now to be able to do that, you got to take care of these forms. You can't throw them around, you can't bang on them. Now you're going to bang on them some, but you just can't get a sledgehammer and beat on them. The forms don't wear out pouring concrete. They get worn out handling and not taking care of them. We're going to try to get these set today, try to get them poured this afternoon, so in the morning we can strip these forms and I can show you how to clean them fairly easy. The quality of these aluminums are the best that you can buy. Good grade aluminum. Like I say, y'all should be able to pour over 3,000 swimming pools with them, but you've got to also take care of them. When we pick out our forms for the return inlets, the skimmers, and the light, we want to paint the tops of them. So when you go out to that form trailer, you can find them real quick and pull them off. Those should be the last forms that go on the trailer. There's a lot of parts to these forms, and you'll become very familiar with it after you do this a couple of times. It just will come second nature to you. All your straight forms, generally you have a 36-inch wide form, a 24-inch wide form, a 12-inch wide form. And then we have filler forms from that point down. You know, from generally we'll do 9s, 8s, 6s, 4s, 3s, and 1s. And like on this pool that we're doing today, we've got 11-inch form. All right, how are we going to make up 11-inch form if we don't have one? 9 and 2. There we go. So it's just kind of piecing things together, all right? This is the face of your form, and this is the back side of your form, okay? Our hole pattern is on 8-inch centers. It means each hole is centered on 8 inches all the way down. These forms are also stackable. That means the hole patterns, I mean, you got your side hole pattern on your side rails. Your top and bottom rails have matching hole patterns. So you could actually stack a form on top of another form and have an 8-inch high form. So very versatile if you're doing a retaining wall or something like that, or even a raised bond beam. Parts that we're going to be dealing with, very basically, is a pin and a wedge. These are curved wedges. They're not straight, and the reason for that is a lot of times you're maybe up underneath and a curved wedge allows you to get in it and hammer it fairly easy that way. You see, of all the items on this job, these are the ones that are lost the most. And one thing we're going to talk about tomorrow when we strip these forms, the best way to do it is when you start taking these out, set them on top of the wall, on top of the concrete wall. Just set them all. As you go around, just set them all on top of the wall. And then once you get it all done, somebody can go around with a bucket and pick them up. And then you have them ready in a bucket for top and carry them on. Now, one thing that we did when you got these, to fill the bucket up with water and put a little dishwashing detergent in it, because these were coated with oil. And if we didn't wash that oil off, when you go to hammer that in, it would slide right back out. So we wanted to get them a little rusty. And so the rustier they are, the better they grip when you hammer them together, okay? We have a speedboat. I don't know if everybody can see the coarse threads on it. That's just so when you're putting something together, it goes quicker. Saves you time. This is called a whaler bracket. Whaler bracket. This goes on the form like that. On a straight wall, you put them at every joint. And then we take a 2x4 and lay that 2x4 flat in like this, all the way down that straight wall. And we do 2 rows, not just one, but 2 rows. That's why you got as many 2x4s as you have. Now, if you're running 1 row and you have to splice another board together to finish out that row, when you put your top 2x4 on, start at the other end and come this way so the longer board will overlap where you had to butt 2 together. This is called a parapet bracket. It's nothing but a piece of angle iron, aluminum, and it's going to go on top of our step to hold the inside forms up for the risers and both. And this is where we're going to use some of these speedboats we were talking about, okay? Leveling jack. This is to help level your forms up. We're going to be pouring these forms all the way to the top, screeding off the top of the form. So we need to get these forms as level as we can get them. These will pin at the bottom hole. You can take a socket set and just ratchet up or down. And generally, a lot of times when you set your forms up, you might be level on half the pool, but the other side maybe needs to be raised a little bit. That's the only place you have to put the leveling jacks on. And you generally want to put these on your inside forms because you really want that inside form level. You're not too worried about the outside. It's the inside is what we're wanting to level. This is a turnbuckle brace. 2x4 screws or nails here. You can do this one of 2 ways. One is you can, when you have your whaler brackets, your 2x4s up here, you can nail it to that. 2x4 here going down to the ground. And then the 2x4 stake to the ground. And then you can turn this to push your wall in or out. Now, good thing to do is when you do oil your forms, oil these too to keep them lubed and everything so they don't rust up on you. You can turn them around like that, 2x4 going up and then nailing to your whaler board, and you can put a metal stake right there to stake it down. So you can do it either way you want to do it. And you'll need, generally on a rectangle pool, depending on whether it's a 16 by 32 or 20 by 40, generally a 16 by 32 you need 3 of them down the side. 18 by 36 and 20 by 40 is generally about 4, equal the distance. And then 2 on your end and just wherever you need to push and pull. Corners. Most of our pools, or all our pools, are designed with 2-foot radius corners. And instead of making our corner forms one piece, which makes them big and heavy, we decided to split them in half. And we call this 2-foot radius split corner sets. So your inside forms, like the 2 on the bottom, those 2 will go together to make your inside 2-foot radius form. That's on a 24-inch radius. Now your outside form, now our wall is 10 inches thick, so what radius do we have? 34. So the outside forms, when they go together, make a 34-inch radius. Now what you're going to see today with this pool that we have is we've got some angles that are not a full 2-foot radius. They're kind of like Grecian corners. They're at a 45. So we can take one of these and one of these, and that makes that 45-degree corner. And you'll see that as we go together. These top forms, I guess a lot of you assume these are the skimmer pilasters. We're only putting 1 skimmer on this pool today, so we only need 1. But that goes out around the skimmer, so you're pouring your skimmer completely in concrete, okay? When we go to start setting these forms today, We're going to get our step in place to be sure, because that's the heaviest thing we've got. We want to be sure it's right where it's going to go. And we're going to set up the inside forms first. And the reason we do that is if we need to make adjustments on the pool, now's the time to do it. Once we get the outside set of forms attached to the inside form, it's not going to move. And I learned this the hard way, because when we first started doing it, we didn't do that. We put them together and we had to shift the pool about 5 inches. And we couldn't move it. All of us got on it and we couldn't move it. So we hooked our backhoe to it and we drug it. What we didn't know is we torqued one of the wall ties and it broke. And it happened to be the bottom wall tie. So when we started pouring the concrete, what happened? It just spread out just like that. So that's something we need to, be very careful about. Another thing, when you're putting these wall ties, what we call a full 10-inch wall tie, the little straps, and they have holes on each end of it, and they pin in with the pin and wedge, and that's what holds your forms together when you're pouring the concrete. The biggest mistake, and it always happens on the bottom hole, is that the person that's trying to hold the wall tie up while the other person is putting the pin in doesn't get it all the way up. So the pin doesn't go through the hole on the wall tie. It's just right below it, or it could be even sitting on top. So before we pour concrete today, everybody needs to walk around this pool and look at these wall ties in the forms. And if you see one that's not perfectly level, if it's dropped down or raised up, we know that it's not pinned. And you don't want to work on a pool wall that's spread open. It is a mess. When you put your wall tie and pin, you're going to put one at the top and one at the bottom. Notice that the slots on the end of the form, how they're milled, so the wall tie will fit in there. When you pull that joint up tight, it keeps the wall tie from falling down. So it'll stick straight out, or kind of straight. It's going to slope a little bit. So we want to be sure that when you put your forms together, you're going to be watching for the top of the form being level, and you're going to be watching for the face of the form to be flush, so you get a good nice pour. And when you get your pins tight, you want to be sure your wall ties are sticking straight out, because we're going to have to hang steel on those. In order to prevent the flowable concrete from running under the forms along low spots in the excavation, use stiff mix from the step concrete to fill in those areas prior to pouring the pool wall. What we're going to do first is the steps have got to be poured first, because we got to pour a stiff mix in that to keep it from flowing out of the risers on the step. Once we get the step poured with the stiff mix, we're going to add a chemical admixture to the concrete in the truck, and it's called super plasticizer, and it's a water reducing agent, and it's what they call in the concrete industry is SCC concrete, self-consolidating concrete. You see, we want this cement to be able to flow around our forms, because you've got good access here. You're going to be able to get the concrete truck all the way around the pool, but say you can only get this concrete to one corner of the pool. You want that concrete to flow so you can drag it and fill the forms up. Now if you add a lot of water to the concrete, first you're weakening the concrete, and when that concrete starts flowing, what happens? It separates. In other words, when you add a lot of water to concrete and make it soupy and it starts flowing, the aggregates start dropping out. And by the time it gets to the end of the forms, all you have is a slurry mix. Okay? This super plasticizer, the best way I can describe it, acts as a lubricant. And it makes that concrete, depends on how much you add to it, will make it from, soupy to just almost watery.
Is that like something they use when you pump it?
Yeah, some people use that to pump, especially in high-rise buildings where there's a lot of steel in the concrete. And what we're going to try to shoot for it this afternoon is what we call a 22-inch spread. Now, all y'all familiar with slump on concrete? When you order concrete, you're getting 4 to 5 inch slump to pour your decks or whatever. We're actually going to be trying to set up a 22-inch spread. Now, what that means In a slump test, you know, you have a 12-inch cylinder, conical cylinder, and you put your concrete in it and rod it and roll it off. Pick it up, set the cone right next to it, put a straight rod across and measure how much the concrete slumped down. And that's your slump. Now in spread, we're actually, you know, that cone is conical, it's like this. When we test spread, that cone is actually turned upside down, so it's sitting like this. You fill that up with your SCC concrete, and when you pick up on it, that concrete just spreads out just like that. And what you do is you measure in 2 different directions and take your average, and that is going to be your spread. Super P only has, depending on temperature, anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half active time. So if he's driving 30 minutes to get to the job and he's got to get set up, I mean, you don't really have. So we're going to be putting 2 rows of steel rebar on the bottom tie and 2 on the top tie. Now we'll set our inside forms up first with the wall ties sticking out. We'll get them all up, and then we go around and tie our steel. Now one thing, while y'all are setting, we've got to locate a panel for our skimmer. That will always be your skimmer panel. Our light panel. Get that centered, which this one's easy because we got plenty of room. We just need to get it centered on the face of the form. All right, so if y'all can get that exactly centered and drop that down about a ½ inch, and you had a framing square. I've always liked getting my skimmer as high as I can. Once we get all the forms up and before we pour, we're going to spray a release agent. And this particular release agent is mine. It's a premium release agent. That's why it's called Prem-Release, premium release agent. It's designed specifically for aluminum forms. It will help keep them cleaner in the long haul. But one problem that we have when we put these forms together is once we butt 2 forms together, we can't spray that edge. So what we want to do is spray all these edges, just the edges, while they're stacked like this. That way, when we do set them in the pool, the edges are already sprayed. And what will happen, we're only going to put a pin in the top hole, in the bottom hole. So we've actually got 3 holes where some cement paste can flow through that little slot, out that hole, and get on the back side or down this edge. And if you start letting concrete build up on this edge here, you start spreading your forms wider and wider. When we pour concrete in these forms, these are raw aluminum. There's no protective layer on it except that release agent. When we pour the concrete into these forms, we're going to have a caustic reaction between the concrete and the aluminum. And this is kind of a break-in period. And what we'll see, once we get the concrete in, you'll start seeing bubbles bubbling up right here at the top. And they're bubbling up this side all the way to right here. And it'll do that for probably your first 3 pours. The second time won't be as much, the third time very little at all. And then you'll have them seasoned, and that'll stop.
Will that kind of make your wall a little rough?
Not really. It'll still be smooth, but what you'll see is little streams where the gas kind of bled up, but it's still smooth there. And your first 3 pours are going to be your worst pours. So don't, what we end up with tomorrow after pouring today is not anywhere close to what it's going to be when you've got about 10 pours on these forms. What's going to happen, the concrete's going to react with this face. The cement paste is going to stick to this. Sand and grit's going to stick to it. So when we strip these forms off, we want to take a scraper, and scrape those forms to get the sand and the grit, any kind of buildup, but we really want this cementitious film to stay on here. We want to get a very fine cementitious film layer on the face of all our forms. What happens is every time you spray these forms with release agent, that film soaks in some of that release agent. Now, after you're about your 3rd or 4th pour, where today we're going to spray these forms pretty heavy because of the reaction and everything. But once you get them broken in, you should really only be misting or fogging these forms. This pool should only take maybe 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of release agent to spray the whole pool when you start misting it. And that's why I'm saying, you know, you need a very good sprayer that you can pump up real high and spray a mist. What you want to do now, let's do it in an organized manner and do it in phases. First, you want to go in, take all your screws out of everything, your return inlets, your lights, your skimmers, your step track over here, your rope anchors. Don't forget to take those out, because I've seen those pull right out of the wall because the concrete's still green. You know, stack all that in a neat place. Do all your whaler boards, get them off, out of the way, get your whalers off. Well, you'll be taking your whalers off as you take your pins and wedges out. Once you get all that stuff out of your way, then let's start doing all the pins and wedges. You know, we talked about setting the pins and wedges on top of the pool wall. Take your square trowel and go around the top, clean off the top rail of your forms. Once you get all your pins, get them cleaned up, just start pulling the forms off. You remember what we said yesterday, your skimmers, lights, return inlet forms that you've painted, put them off by themselves. Let those be the last ones to go on your trailer. So when you get to the next job, they're the first thing you pull off and you put in the location you want them, and then you stack the rest of the forms around them. Separate your forms, put all your 36s together, all your 24s, your 12s. You learn, you keep everything separated. When you go to do the next job, it's easier to pull and go on. How to strip these forms and do it in an organized manner to help keep you from losing things, and plus not maybe damaging something. The cleaner you keep these forms, the lighter they're going to stay first for handling and transporting. Every time when you strip your forms off, you'll have a flashing joint where your two forms met. If you'll clean this up while the concrete is still green, it makes it real easy. And you can take a wedge, just take the back of it and run it up the wall, and that concrete will scrape right off. If you wait later, you'll have to use a grinder to grind this off. But while the concrete is green, you can scrape that joint real easy. That'll save a lot of work, you know, later on with a grinder. After you strip your forms, you have your wall ties still sticking out of the wall. To remove this, you can strike straight down and the ties will break off. You can take a wedge and scrape your seam and remove all the flashing. That will save you grinding later on if you let the concrete set up. All right, when you're pouring your wall, one way that we attach our liner track to the wall after we strip the forms is you can use pieces of plastic control joint. It's common in any pool distributor. We put this control joint into the concrete perpendicular with the form, about 12 inches apart. What this does, when you strip your forms, you can lay your liner track on top of the pool wall and then tech drill with a self-drilling tech screw right through the liner track into the plastic control joint, and that will hold the track in place till you pour your deck. When we're setting our forms and we install our light niche, to be able to get to the electrical conduit and the grounding lug on the back of the niche, we actually jammed a piece of styrofoam between the light niche and the outside form, which left kind of a thin layer of cement, so we should be able to peck that away just like this. And this will give us access to our conduit hub and to our grounding or bonding lug on the light niche. So, and this is one of the plastic light niches. There's your bonding lug right there, and there is where you connect your conduit going up to your junction box for the light. In this particular job, we've installed a liner receiver track on our steps that will help hold the liner on the top and second step to keep it from sliding down. So you can see that we placed the track on our forms and poured it in place in the concrete when we made our pour. Now, one way to keep your track clean when you pour your concrete is we use a foam backer rod, and this is used in expansion joints to keep your sealant from flowing through it. But this is very easy to push into the track and then dig out of the track when you strip your forms off. So just a good tip there to keep your track clean when you pour your step. Okay, as you can see, our light niche is poured in place. It's flush with the concrete wall. Very simple process to do. You'll be able to place a light anywhere in the pool that you want to. This is just one type of light that we use in the concrete wall construction. There are other types that will work with this system also. On all our radius forms, our step forms, and bench forms, we put an identification tag on each form. We put the name of the pool company on the tag so it can be identified that it belongs to that pool company. Then we also put a description of what this particular panel is for, or form is for. This happens to go to our S610 walk-in step, and so you see step 610 and then the letter Q. On your step drawing that shows the layout of the step, every form on this step is identified by some letter. This one just happens to be Q. This will help you identify that form and where it goes on that step. On our return inlets, we use a flush face return inlet that can be attached to the form during the pour. So when you strip your form, your return inlet's flush with the concrete wall. As you can see that our skimmer was placed inside the wall, attached to the forms, and concrete poured around it. This skimmer is completely encased in concrete. You can see that it's flush with the concrete wall just like any other vinyl liner skimmer installation. Ready to go. Gasket, drop liner, gasket, and faceplate. We always need to place rope anchors on our pool walls when we're pouring. There is a type of anchor that I can give you the information on that can be poured into the wall when we pour the forms. And it's a brass insert that's poured inside the concrete, and then your rope anchor that screws into there for you to attach your rope to after you drop your liner. It's important to understand this video is a training aid to help familiarize crew members on how to set up the Aquaforms forming system. Pool builders should use proper pool building practices with the forming system. Always follow local, state, and national building codes for your specific area.